Hey, children over 30, how's it going? So, I was supposed to wake up early this morning and go to the skate park, and I ended up going out last night, so that didn't happen. And it was super hot, so I tried to go ice skating, and when I got to the rink, there was literally like 150 kids there, so I like immediately bailed. So that didn't happen, and then I went to work and I came home and I realized that I haven't really done shit today. So I figured I would make this video because I've been thinking about making this video. So when I first got back into skating, aggressive skating is what I wanted to do. Like I immediately was looking at what aggressive edits had come out. Like since I'd got out of the game, as they say, scoping out aggressive skates, seeing what was new. That was like the game plan. And then I think about a month in, maybe a little bit over that, I started getting exposed to more like the big wheel stuff, and some of the dudes that I really enjoyed watching were doing the big wheel thing. So I tried it out and just immediately fell in love with the actual act of skating, which sounds ridiculous. But when I think about it, like when I was little, I super loved to rollerblade. Like when I had my shitty rec skates from Toys R Us or wherever the fuck, and then when I got my first serious pair of rollerblades, which are like some rollerblade squads, I think. I got some K2s pretty shortly after that from Played Against Sports, I think. But yeah, at that point, it ceased being fun to just go skate outside. And at the time, I was like 10 or something like that. So I didn't make the connection that, oh, hey, these skates suck for skating. Maybe this isn't, maybe there are some better options out there, which at the time, back in like the late 90s, like I doubt there really was. The whole free skating thing, is pretty new in the grand scheme of things. Even though, I mean, if you think about Chris Edwards, like he kind of started on a big wheel setup, I mean, he made a point of taking these, what would now be considered shitty rec skates and using them on all terrain and using them on all terrain to great effect, man. Like he was doing grinds, he was doing gaps, he was skating vert, like all in the same setup. Like this whole power blading thing that's like a pipe dream now, like he was living it at the time. But anyway, so yeah, I had these skates that I wanted to skate, but they sucked for skating outside, so like I never skated unless I went to the skate park. There weren't any street spots by my house, and like my parents aren't gonna take me to some, ledge behind a building so I can go grind on it and stuff like that. That's parents don't do that kind of thing. This cup describes my personality. So yeah, anyway, as soon as I figured out how fun it was to skate on like skates that were actually made for skating, the dream pretty immediately became like, how do I incorporate these two worlds together? Like, how do I get the good grinder blader setup that, you can actually skate for more than like up to a ledge or something like that. And the ironic thing is, like, I feel like in any other of the action sports, like, that's not a huge request. Like, skateboards are pretty decent for commuting, and scooters are pretty decent for commuting, and a bike is a fucking bike. By all logic, like, why shouldn't there be rollerblades that you can like do both with? I mean, it would make sense, right? So I went through like a lot of experimentation and stuff like that. Spent the better part of a year, I think, in all actuality, trying to make this thing happen, and it just doesn't come together like that. Like skating and grinding, at least being proficient at both in the current context of everything. I mean, those things are pretty much mutually exclusive. The evolution of aggressive skates and aggressive skating has been so grind centric that the boots themselves have sacrificed like everything that there is to sacrifice that's actually conducive to skating, to make grinding easier. Anti-rocker, was a pretty early adaptation, but shortly after that, the wheels on the outside got smaller too. And, you made big clunky boots that could take a beating, and put big thick liners in them, to accommodate like all the space that you were putting around the foot, and, make top sides really cushy feeling. And you put a big sole on it that sticks out like 2 inches in one direction and like at least an inch in the other. And you make the frames really short, so again, like your back slides and top sides and stuff like that are easy. And because of that big piece of plastic between the frame that's now also plastic, so you can do slides on it, and the sole, like there's no point in really even having a carbon fiber boot at that point because there's just like too much plastic involved. And it all adds up to a thing that sucks for actual skating. And it's weird to think about like that because I freaking love Eugen. Like Eugen is the man. Every time an edit comes out, like I'm gonna watch it at least a few times immediately. And trying to think of him doing some of those tricks and like some K2 style points or something like that. I mean, like there's no way. I mean, he's a really good skater, and I'm not questioning his ability to make adaptations and stuff like that. But trying to do like that, I don't remember what edit it was, but there was like a front torque to like a front torque on another rail. Like that's not gonna happen on a fucking leather backslide plate. Like no. Not to mention the whole like ninja switch up game when you have 2-inch sole plates. And again, I'm not saying the dude's not talented. Like the dude is one of the greatest of all time. But things like that become a possibility when you get giant soles like that. I mean, there's a reason that he skates giant soles. And it's great. And I'm glad that we have that dude, you know, and somebody pushing skating in that direction to the capacity that he is. Like he has pushed grinds like so far beyond most people before him. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially like on a technical level. But anyway, okay, so we can identify him as like a grind specialist. Like he's got some gaps and stuff like that, but dude, like grinds are like where it's at for him. So to me, that would be indicative of a very specialized setup. Like how most people think about the wizard skate, you know, it's like this really high-end boot that people really weren't skating too much, and then you gut it and you put in this liner from a ski company, and then you put on these frames that you had made just for like this type of skating. And yeah, it's like just a bunch of pieces that you put together to make this very highly specialized setup that's good for this group of things. And to me, at least in application and design, setups like dudes like Eugen use are basically that for grinding. But the thing is, like, all the aggressive skates out there are basically that. You know, to varying degrees. I mean, you know, you can get the modern K2s have a little bit of a smaller sole on them. So, you know, you can carve a little bit deeper on them than you would be able to on shadows. And, you know, Seba has made some carbon boots that you can take the soles off of if you want to, or Sean Unwin had the genius idea of like drilling them into the sides. There are some variations like here or there, but for the most part, like everybody's making that really specialized grinder boot. So trying to find a midpoint between like a free skate or a freestyle skate, urban skate, whatever you want to call them, stuff that you use to jump off things with big wheels and slalom, and this very specialized grinder setup, like ironically enough, it can't be done. I think this may be kind of a void in the market, and it's kind of tough because I don't know that with how much grinding means to rollerblading right now, if people would be willing to compromise the amount that they would have to. I mean, if you were to theoretically make something that's halfway between like an F7 or an FR or something like that, and an aggressive skate like a pair of razors or something, theoretically you would have to make compromises at both ends. The soles would have to be smaller, the boots would have to be less clunky, you would have to have an aluminum frame of some sort, it would have to be at least 72 millimeter wheels. Ideally, you would want something other than plastic where the frame actually connects, like, you know, some metal plates or maybe like some carbon fiber or maybe some fiberglass, something like that. And that all kind of adds up to skates that don't fit the mold of aggressive skating right now. Like if people buy skates and they can't immediately do top soles and backslides in them, like they get pissed off about it. And this is why you see people put like anti-rockers on Aeons. And because of this sort of like perpetuating of, you know, making the most specialized grinding boot possible, you know, we're all kind of spoiled. Like no trick is really that hard. I mean, we do the hard things about them. Like people may do a trick on an obstacle that's really hard, or they may like true spin it, or, you know, I mean, there are things that you can do to make tricks harder than they inherently are. But dude, last time I went grinding, and I hadn't grinded in like months before that, and I had this Solomon setup with basically shadow soles on it, and I learned like backslides and fish brains and like one other topside like in the same day. Like that shouldn't be possible. Like those tricks should be stuff that pros do. Like if you do a fish brain on a ledge, you shouldn't be some Grom dancer blader that hasn't grinded in like months before that. I mean, you should be like absolutely at the top of the game. But such isn't the case. And I think aggressive skating has come to a point where it identifies itself, like almost solely and grinds so much that, yeah, people aren't willing to compromise. Like, your hardcore street skater isn't going to be buying a 72 setup anytime soon. Like, they wouldn't dig it. It wouldn't be like something that they would adapt long term 90% of the time. And the nature of rollerblades, just the way they work for whatever reason, unless you're skating, like I said, at least 72s on an aluminum frame with a boot that has some good reinforcement in the base, like, it's not going to be that good for just rolling around. I mean, those are like the bare minimums. I'm skeptical even. I mean, I haven't tried them. So correct me if I'm wrong on this in the comments or, otherwise. But the 72 Aeons, even with that unimold boot structure where it's theoretically super stiff and responsive compared to like every other aggressive skate out there, like everybody talks about how responsive they are, but I mean, is it aluminum frame responsive? Does it even like get close? Even the 80 millimeter Aeon, I mean, with that giant sole and just the whole thing being made of plastic, like, it's not going to replace a free skate anytime soon. And it sucks that that's the case. I wish there was some magical plastic that was like, just as stiff and responsive as aluminum, but there's not. So, full circle, what the hell does all this have to do with me other than these are my thoughts and opinions? I just figured out that I like skating way more than I like grinding. Like, the sensation, to me, skates were made to go fast and they were made to be agile and, just these, like, you put them on and you become the fucking Flash. Like, that's my vision of rollerblades. Maybe Flash plus Step Up 3D. Anyway, so when you get an aggressive skate and you make all these compromises like I was talking about and you get a skate that's not good for skating anymore, it's just so hard to enjoy. I mean, the only time that I enjoy skating aggressive skates is when I'm like actually sliding in them, which, I mean, like, how much of skating really is that? Like, unless you go to a park and just find a box and skate it like the whole time, you're going to be skating more than you're grinding. So, like, why? To me, it doesn't make sense to make that many compromises for something that I see as, even hypothetically, like, best case scenario, if I got super into grinding, I don't see it being more than like a third of what I do overall. It's fun, don't get me wrong. I like sliding across things. It feels cool. But man, when you take big wheels, even to like a skate park, where the aggressive skate should dominate, if the park's got good flow to it and you're just airing everything, like if you watch Joe Atkinson's run at the feast that happened in Saudi Arabia, and he was skating like V13s, but he had like these solid aluminum 72 frames. And his first run, he was just like flying around the park and doing transfers and stuff like that, and not a lot of like technical tricks, but man, he was just like park skiing and it was dope. That stuff is really fun. It's really engaging to, both skaters and people outside of skating. Like, people like seeing other people flying through the air. Like, I don't know, it's just a fact of life. It's dope. So yeah, I have way more fun going to the skate park in my F7s, which is like a rocker to 80 setup, than I ever did in like a grinding specific setup. When I was skating like straight grinder boots with anti-rockers, that's what I did. I would find a box and I would go do a bunch of grinds, and then, when I fell enough times, I would go home. When I was tired, I would go home. And now it's just all about like carving it in new ways and figuring out new things that I can get speed here and I can jump out there and just like float through the air and do a Liu Kang out of this thing. And it's super fun. Things that I used to consider gaps, like, maybe if I get like a ton of speed and jump really hard, I can clear this thing. Now I can just like pop through my heels and like clear the whole thing, and it's amazing. And I can still do all of my swivels and stuff with this setup. I mean, it's not as good for swivels as like my drifts are, which are like, crazy rockered and a carbon fiber boot and made for that kind of thing. If I can still do like 80% of my footwork and I can go and like fly through the air, and I got a good wheel setup for, doing wheel slides across boxes and stuff. I mean, I'm in a pretty good spot. I go to a skate park and I have like a really good time, and I explore the whole skate park, and I really feel connected with what I feel skating is. And it's a bummer, that grinds can't really be part of that equation. I mean, they could to some extent, like, Tree's pretty good at it. But as far as like tech-wise incorporating grinding hardware into the setup. Like, I just don't think there's a setup that does it right now, is what it comes down to. So if I have to choose, I'm going to pick a setup that is incredibly agile, incredibly fast, good for jumps and gaps, good for slides, over a setup that's good for grinds. So that's it. Should be wrapping up that video collab with Tiago and Sean on one pretty soon. Me and Brock's section's all done, so I'm just kind of waiting on them. I'm really anxious and I'm really excited. Yeah. Later.